Have you ever heard that phrase, if you can't be good, be careful? Well, today we're talking about being brave at work. And I love the phrase, if you can't be confident, be brave. Because this podcast is all about helping you build your capacity and your confidence so that you can do things with more ease and more flow and more enjoyment at work. But we cannot get away from the fact that there are always going to be moments where confidence eludes you. There are going to be moments where you're learning, and so you don't feel confident yet. There's going to be times when you're building your confidence, and therefore you don't feel confident yet. Or there's just going to be times where things are plain uncomfortable. So I looked at this word in the dictionary, brave, and it says ready to face and endure danger or pain, showing courage. Now, in our workplaces, maybe we have to face danger and pain, and that might be physical in your situation. But for most of us, it's ready to face and endure emotional danger or emotional pain. It's ready to be uncomfortable. It's ready to be unsure and do the thing anyway. That's what brave is. And I'm guessing that you've been brave in your life, but I wanted us to think today about specifically how we can apply bravery to our work lives. And Brene Brown, who I love, said bravery is a behavior, not a trait we're born with. And that makes me like bravery even more because that means that I can use bravery when I've got nothing else. So I don't have to be born with bravery in order to use it. It's not a fixed thing. It's not like, well, you've either got it or you haven't. It's something that you can choose. It's something that I can choose in a moment and use if I need to. And I thought of 10 different areas where you may need to be brave at work. And we're going to go through those today. And then we're also going to look at, so how do you actually be brave? What does that require? So, the first situation where you may be required to be brave is around taking on new challenges. So let's say you're doing something where you're stepping right out of your comfort zone, or you are tackling an unfamiliar task or a project. That might require bravery. Because think about it. It's new. You haven't done it before. You don't necessarily know exactly what you're doing. All right, you might be able to apply some of the things that you've used in the past, but you don't know if you can get that thing perfect. You don't know if you can get that thing right first time. You probably don't even know how it's going to go. So you're not necessarily going to feel 100% confident in your ability to complete it or in your ability to get that thing right. You can feel confident in your ability to give something a go, but you may not feel completely confident. And that is where you could use bravery instead. Now, some people will say, I will not do that thing because I don't feel confident. So I won't step out of my comfort zone, or I won't tackle that unfamiliar task or that project because I just don't feel confident. But of course, that's a massive blocker to ever feeling confident. I'm guessing that you didn't feel confident doing loads of the things that you do now in the past, but you do feel fairly confident now because you repeated them so many times they've become second nature. Because now you trust in your ability to actually do them and get them right. So what do you do before you've got that? If you want to move in a new direction, if you want to grow, if you want to progress, maybe if you want to get a bonus, there could be loads of reasons why you might want to take on a new challenge. But that might require bravery. So even if you're not feeling very confident, could you be brave? And if you were being brave, what would you do? I'm guessing you would take on that challenge. I'm guessing you'd say, yeah, I'll give that a go. Instead of shrinking back or hesitating or saying no. Bravery can help you to take on a new challenge. I've been coaching a client recently around public speaking, and I asked them if I could use this example because I said I was going to talk about being brave on the podcast. And they'd been asked to present some work that had been going on. So this was a piece of research. And they didn't know whether the results of the research were going to be well received. Now, this was a piece of research into culture. This was a piece of research into staff, how they felt, and the culture of the organization. And they said it would just be easier to shelve it because this is going to be difficult. So not only are they building their capacity around presenting and public speaking, they're going to have to be brave to even put this stuff in front of people. And one of the things that we really ended up coaching around was being brave. Because confidence just felt like it was way too far in this situation. Yes, they could be confident that they knew the material, they could be confident and that they were prepared, but they didn't feel confident about what was going to go on in the room afterwards. They did not feel confident about the questions they were going to get asked and the decisions that he was going to ask them to make on the back of this. So, that required a lot of bravery. My second example is around speaking up. So let's say you're voicing your opinion, you're sharing a concern, you are giving an idea, and that might be in a meeting or a discussion, especially if that idea or that concern could go against the grain, especially if it might challenge the status quo. That's a moment where brave might be required. You know your particular organization, you know the people around you. You know what's generally okay and what might be pushing at the boundaries. But you also might know in a particular situation that actually you have something to say. Now, if you choose comfort in that situation, you're probably not even going to say anything. But what if you chose to be brave? Then what? Then maybe you could say something even though your hands were shaking. Then maybe you could say something even if your words ended up garbled. Then maybe you could come back on a challenge even if somebody disagreed with you. Because that's the kind of thing that brave would do, isn't it? Brave doesn't require you to be perfect. Brave doesn't require you not to have any fear. Brave doesn't even require you to mask nerves or any of it. Brave just requires you to speak. My brave moment of speaking up, I mean, I've had a few, let's face it, but the one that I talked about before on the podcast was I was in a complaints conference and there was like 200 people there. And the guy on stage was severely misrepresenting somebody. And the person that they were misrepresenting was not there. And I knew that they were misrepresenting this person because I'd spoken to them like a week before. And I thought, I can't let him get away with this. I have to say something. And so I stuck up my hand, took the microphone, and proceeded to tell everybody in the audience and the guy on stage that the person that he was talking about was being misrepresented as far as I was aware or as far as I was concerned. And that took me being brave because I did not feel confident. My hands were sweating, I was shaking, and I'm pretty sure that the entire time that I was talking, my face was completely red. Everybody turned to look at me and they were looking kind of shocked that I dared to contradict the guy on stage. But I'm really proud of myself that I did that, and I still think it was the right thing to do. But I sure as hell didn't feel confident. I used brave as my catalyst instead of confidence. The third place where you might need bravery is if you have to stand up for yourself. If you're going to advocate for fair treatment or boundaries or recognition, it can be intimidating. So there was a recent podcast episode in this series about how to be assertive at work. And sometimes assertiveness requires bravery. For some reason, that podcast has stormed in at number 2. It's had over 500 listens. So I'm guessing some of you need to be a little more assertive at work. But imagine you're in a situation where you're required to be assertive because somebody at work is testing your boundaries. You may not feel totally confident while you're practicing your assertiveness. And if you want to know more about assertiveness, go back and listen to that podcast episode. But let's say you're working on setting and maintaining appropriate boundaries in your working life. You're practicing being assertive in relation to those boundaries. But sometimes while you're practicing that, you are not going to feel confident. You're doing something new. You're trying to do something different. You're trying to grow your capacity. So until that feels really comfortable to you, You could use bravery instead. You could use bravery to say, I actually don't have the capacity for that right now. Or, if you want me to do that, I'm happy to, but it does mean that this thing is going to be delayed by 2 weeks. That might take bravery, but if you haven't got confidence in that moment, bravery may be the missing ingredient that you need. Which brings us on nicely to number 4. You may require bravery when handling conflict. So let's say you are addressing a conflict, or there's a difficult conversation with a colleague or a superior. You may require bravery to navigate that situation. What if you don't feel totally confident, but you still want to handle that situation constructively? You still want to address that conflict. You don't want to move away and you don't want to hide, which is probably what your brain would like you to do if you're not feeling too confident. Then what do? Use brave. So somewhere I used to work many years ago, there was a particularly tricky character. And this person was actually all right, but their manner could be difficult, and people were a bit scared of them. And I watched that person and another person having a conflict in a meeting, and it was fairly uncomfortable for everybody in that room. And it happened multiple times during the course of this meeting. And I'm guessing everybody had noticed because it felt uncomfortable, but nobody was actually saying anything until there was one individual who decided, I'm guessing it took some bravery for them to do that, because actually this person was not a peer, right? They were less senior than these people, to point out what seemed to be happening and say, is there a way of us addressing this in a different way? Now, the room then held their breath, which indicates to me that that person had to go out on a limb in order to say that. There was a conflict happening. They noticed it. I'm guessing they didn't feel completely comfortable, but for whatever reason, they decided that somebody should go out on a limb and see whether they could insert themselves to try and resolve it constructively. No one else in the room did that, although other people did join in once they had taken that first brave step. But their bravery actually allowed us to get something done in that meeting that otherwise I don't think would have been done. And sometimes handling conflict is like that. You're going to need to be brave, because there might be some uncomfortable emotions associated with it for you. There may be uncomfortable emotions for everybody in the room, but that doesn't mean that you have to just shrink away or hide or be quiet because you don't have the confidence, if you could use brave instead. Number 5 is around taking responsibility. And this might encapsulate acknowledging mistakes or owning up to something and taking steps to rectify a situation. That can demonstrate bravery and accountability, right? But that can demonstrate bravery. So I recently talked on a podcast episode about when I made a mistake when I was a young lawyer. And I guess it took a bit of bravery for me to hold that file in my hands, walk into my boss's office and said, I've messed something up. I'm guessing that you've all heard of times where someone did something wrong and they knew that they'd done something wrong, but they attempted to hide it and push it under the carpet. I used to work in healthcare litigation, and I can tell you that we saw instances in people's healthcare where something had gone wrong, an error had been committed, some outcome had been adverse, and they didn't tell the patient. They didn't write it in the notes. They didn't go and seek feedback or supervision. They probably just hoped that it would go away. Now, I think that's a normal human response to a situation that feels really difficult. And I know that not in every situation have I done the brave thing in relation to this. I definitely haven't. There will be stuff that I've completely ignored. And there's probably stuff that you've ignored too. Because taking responsibility can require bravery, because you're probably not going to feel that confident about it. Especially if you're in a situation which When somebody takes responsibility or holds themselves accountable, then blames, shames, names, etc. And that may be going on the outside in your organization, or it may just be going on inside of you. But when I do acknowledge my mistake and own up to it, and when you do, it shows bravery. Number 6 is around making tough decisions. So sometimes you're going to need to make a decision which is unpopular, or you're going to make a decision which has a potential risk to it. And it can take bravery to follow that through. So sometimes if I'm coaching someone on a decision that they're struggling with or a decision that they can't make, I'll ask them, if you were being really brave, what would you do? And that answer will often reveal their desired course of action or the thing that they really know that they should do, but they know that there's a risk associated with that course of action. They fear the potential fallout from that situation. And so, doing the thing they want to do or that they know they should do requires bravery, because it requires that they make themselves, probably, and potentially other people uncomfortable. Let's say I have the example of somebody in my team who isn't performing. And despite all my best efforts and intentions and working through things with them and providing them with a lot of support and scaffolding, they just can't get there. They can't do the role that I need them to do. In that situation, I may have to make the tough decision that this is not the job for them. Now, if you're a leader in an organization, you may have had to make decisions like that in the past. That is a tough decision. That decision often requires bravery. And the brave thing to do would be to let that person go. But those hard, tough decisions require our bravery. And that's just one example. You might have loads of examples of tough decisions you've had to make, and they may have required you to be brave. Number 7 is around taking the lead. So let's say you're leading a team or a project and it's a challenging circumstance or it's a very uncertain environment. It can demand bravery. Because you may not feel entirely confident about the outcome of this thing. You may not feel entirely confident in your ability to lead someone through this. But once you've made a decision that that's where you're going, you've charted your course, then what? That is probably going to require bravery. And what an amazing thing for a leader to demonstrate, bravery. Even if they're not entirely confident, they can be brave. Even if you're not entirely confident, you can be brave. Amazing for other people to witness and watch you being brave. I once completed a research project, and it required the organization, given the timing of it, to be brave. Because they knew that it was going to be a great piece of work once it was done. But they also knew that in order to do it, it could ruffle some feathers. It probably would ruffle some feathers. But they made the decision to be brave and to go ahead. And I admired them for that. And that allowed me to be brave, even when things got difficult, even though it was tough, even though there were moments where I just did not feel confident. And that piece of research was still quoted years later. So our bravery paid off. Their bravery paid off. Number 8 is around embracing change. So people say that, don't they? Oh, embracing change. Change is the only constant. There is usually organizational change. Nothing stays still forever. And that might be a restructuring or a tech advancement. And you might be required to use your brave in order to embrace it and adapt. Because you might not feel that confident in your ability to succeed in this new environment. You might not feel that confident in whatever's going to happen. You might not feel confident in your ability to use a particular product that's going to be brought in. But what if you can be brave? And bravery in that situation says, okay, I don't know exactly how this is going to turn out. I can't say exactly how it's going to look, but I'm in. And I'm going to do whatever is necessary. That's brave. That is a brave when you don't yet know what might happen. Think about career change. That is embracing change. Many people change their careers, go for a new role, change direction, go in a new industry. That requires bravery, as well as planning and thinking and providing yourself with enough structural support that you need to get through it. It also requires some bravery. It requires you to step out into the unknown and do it. And that may be scary. God, it was scary for me when I was thinking about going to work in the NHS after I'd been a solicitor. It was scary for me to let go of that identity that I'd built up. But it was a great choice in the end. It was scary for me again to start doing policy and strategy work when I'd been working in litigation for all that time. That required me to be a bit brave. It was scary for me to leave my full-time job and start running the business and making this podcast for you. It required me to be brave. But now I look back on those things and I think, do you know, they're the things I'm actually really proud of. The moments where I was brave are also the moments where I am now proud. So imagine that. A lot of bravery probably could equal a lot of pride. So if you're career changing or you're embracing some kind of change, you may require your bravery. Number 9 is around advocating for others. So let's say you're speaking up for a colleague who may not have a voice in a situation, or you're defending somebody's rights or their contributions. That can be a brave act. We recently had a podcast episode about how to be a confident ally. And we talked in that episode about witnessing things that may be happening within your organization, which might not be in line with your organization's values or your values. Now, in that situation, it's brave to do something about it. There will be plenty of people that don't have the confidence, but also don't have the bravery to do something about it. But what if you could? Here's an example that I hear about all the time. So this happens in a gendered way, but it probably also happens in relation to other characteristic like age, race, social class. Is somebody getting talked over consistently in a meeting, or somebody else getting credited with the idea that somebody shared earlier on? And you may notice that in a meeting. You may notice that happening. And imagine you just notice it and you sit there and think, it was actually Sarah that made that point, and now John is taking the credit for it. That doesn't seem right. Or imagine you notice that Sarah seems to keep getting talked over, even when she's making a good point. Now imagine you're going to be brave. What would you do? If I was being brave in that situation, I might say, Sarah just made a point and I would like to hear what she has to say. I might bring it to the chair's attention that people keep getting talked over in that meeting and it seems to be the same kind of people. Maybe we need to do something about that in our organisation. Maybe I would say, do you know, the research suggests that men often get credited with women's ideas even after they've just said them in a meeting. I think that just happened here. That is brave. It has the potential to ruffle feathers. It may not, but it might. And it's brave. But you may wish to advocate for somebody, even when you're not feeling that confident about it. The last one, number 10, is around handling emergencies. So let's say there's an emergency situation. You may have to be brave because you may not have time to think and reflect on everything. You may not have time to plot the exact right course. You may have to be the person who makes the decision, even if you wouldn't normally be. So you may have to be brave in order to be decisive. In essence, it sounds like brave could help us potentially do a lot of things at work. Face fears, take risks, stand up for what we believe in, even when, and mostly when, it isn't easy. Because let's face it, you don't need brave when it's easy. You don't need brave when you're in your comfort zone. And the great thing about being brave is that you don't have to feel confident about what you're doing either. So when confidence feels just way too far, could you be brave? And how do we actually be brave? What does it take to be brave at work? And I came up with 4 ideas. You may have more. So let's say we don't need confidence. We don't need to be sure. We don't need to be certain. We don't need to be comfortable. So what does it take to be brave? And one of the things I think it might take is just a decision. I don't need anything else. I don't need to be confident. I don't need to feel great about this. I just need to be brave, and therefore I can do it in fear and still take the action that I want to take. I can be shaking and I can still be brave. I can be red and sweating and I can still be brave. What if it just requires a decision? And yes, there's going to be moments where you make the decision not to be brave, but there probably are going to be moments where you might want to make the decision to be brave. And what if that's all it is? A decision. The second thing is it could be a commitment to a way of being. So I had an old colleague called Nick, and he always said something which stuck with me. His way of doing things was that he would run at fires. Now, that's a metaphor, obviously. And it meant when there was a situation that seemed to be difficult or knotty or might be sensitive or really hard to resolve, his way of being, his approach that he decided ahead of time was that he would run at the fire. And that meant he would not ignore it, not procrastinate, not shut down, not hide, but instead he would walk at the fire. He would go to that situation and see what he could do to make it right. And I loved that. And because Nick had already decided that he would run at fires, he knew how he was going to act in a particular situation. He did not need to leave it to his fear brain in the moment to decide. And it was a great check for him. So let's say he was avoiding something, he would know that he was going against his decided approach. His decided way of being was that he was going to run at fires. And so that would pick him up and check him on what he was doing, and it would help him to move forward. And could this be strong enough that actually it becomes an identity thing? So when I'm coaching somebody, I'm always looking out for who does this person think they are? What are those values that they hold really dear? That even in tough situations, they want to live by. Because that is going to determine a lot of what you end up doing, especially in situations where things are not easy. So let's say your identity is brave. Then how do you deal with that challenge? Then what do you say yes to? Then what do you say no to when that is your identity? Imagine somebody asks you to describe yourself and you say, well, I'm very brave. Ooh, that is powerful. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that before, but that is powerful. And that's a powerful signal to your brain that even when things are scary or even when we're not confident, we're brave. The next thing is, I think bravery requires a willingness to be uncomfortable. I did some training today, and in that training, somebody said, I have to get out of my comfort zone in order to get back in it. And I thought that was great. We were talking about speaking up. And she said, in order to get into my comfort, in order for speaking up to be in my comfort zone, I have to get out of my comfort zone. So it's like, I have to get out of this nice warm bath and get cold in order to get back in again. That's what it's going to take. And it's the same with brave. If you've got a willingness to be uncomfortable, that may help you to be brave. Because you can say, well, I know I'm going to be uncomfortable. This is going to suck, but I am willing. And imagine how that could help your bravery. So, is there anywhere at the moment in your work life or maybe even in your personal life where you are being called forward? Is there somewhere where you could do with being brave? And if this podcast resonated with you, I've got a challenge for you. And this may require some bravery. What if you did a brave experiment and you decided to commit the next 7 days or the next 30 days to being brave? What if you did Brave May? What would happen? If you were being brave at work, what would you say yes to? What would you say no to? What would you do differently? Who would you speak to? What would you attempt? I'm going to do Brave May. We can make it a new thing. It doesn't have a ring to it, but we're going to go with it anyway. So let's say you were having Brave May. What would you do? You didn't even need to be confident because you could just be brave. And imagine how much your confidence would grow by the end of Brave May. So that is what I have for you this week. And if you would like to come and work with me, I have 2 current offers for you. The first is, drum roll, a new members club. The members club is just for women. And it took me being brave to set this up, actually. So we have 7 members now, and we had our first call last night. We're starting small but mighty. And this is a place where you have access to online on demand training and a private podcast, but you also have the opportunity to come and get coached or listen to coaching as part of a group call every other week. Whether that's a challenge you're having at work, an area where you don't feel so confident, something that you're struggling with, where there's some big emotions, you can bring that to the call, be witnessed by the community, be supported by the community, and get some coaching. Our first call last night was great. I learned a lot. I think the participants did too. So you are welcome to come and join us in the members club. I will leave a link in the show notes. The second way you can work with me is through private coaching. And I think it often takes bravery to even reach out for confidence coaching, because very often the people who I work with have not had the conversation with anyone about exactly how they're feeling, exactly their worries and their concerns. And it is brave to book a call and to get on a call and be vulnerable enough to share with me the things that are challenging for you. That takes bravery. But that bravery is richly rewarded when you, 12 weeks later, feel a damn sight more confident than you used to. So, Brave May, here we come. And I will see you in next week's episode. Bye.